So we're going to do step 10 in section A, which is the secondary drive gear. That comes out of SAC 5. Most of that stuff's already been opened up. We've already Loctited in our bearings into our secondary drive gear and also added a drop of oil to each one of them. Just to make them run smoother and quieter. I like to add a little red Loctite to the shafts of the secondary drive gear to get them to hold on to the bearings better. I'll just put a little bit of red there. I'll push out the main shaft. Just to slide the secondary drive gear on, and then with the bearing towards the gear, put on the bearing holder. And then that uses this same hardware from the side frames set. Just Loctite all those fasteners in. I'll put these in loose because we have to adjust the backlash. And to set the backlash of the secondary drive gear to the main gear, you want to make sure that all your screws are loose in the motor mount and on the bearing block. And you want to push it as tight as you can. Now, you can then try to back each block off the same amount to get a little bit of backlash in there. Now the key is that you want a nice normal amount of backlash, which is just barely any slop at all, which I've got too much. But also, after you get it set, you want to make sure you can see an air gap between the main gear and the secondary gear so they're not rubbing against one another. So if there's not a air gap in there and that air gap's not parallel, then that means you don't have those bearing blocks in alignment, and that's what's causing that not to be parallel. So you just need to make an adjustment on that. So it takes a little bit of time to do it, but it's just a just work with it. I usually just tighten up one screw at a time. And that's the secondary drive gear installation. While I'm here, I can put the main shaft collar on. Now, this ship's sensitive to slop in the main shaft, so make sure you take all the slop out of the main shaft, vertical. Make sure you get that all the way out, and if there's any slop in there, you pull it out of there. And when you tighten up your set screws, if it kind of pinches the bearing blocks, you can actually loosen up the bearing blocks and move them back a little bit. But you want no slop and a good free running assembly. Adjust the backlash in this one, making sure that all my fasteners are loose. So start with it tight. Usually gives you just a little bit of drag there. I just start backing them. Trying to keep that gap parallel. And you're making sure that there's an air gap between the gears. And then check your backlash in several places because it sometimes changes. Once you get it set, tighten up the cap screws on each side. Go ahead and put on that collar on the main shaft. Okay, while I have this pack open, I also will take the time. These are the collars that lock the conversion axle in, and the screws that hook that on. And these are the conversion axle bearings that get glued into the wing, and you want to red Loctite these bearings into the holders early before you get working on that project, so they're set up before you. So same as with the other bearings, I'll clean the bearing, clean the holder, then apply just a little bit of red, keeping the red out of the bearing, and then twisting it into place to spread out the Loctite, and then wiping it clean. Make sure those are fully seated, and keep the red Loctite out of the bearing. And I'll just use these, I'll just put these two screws in so I don't lose them into these lock collars for the spindle axles. It's a little bit out of step. But it'll just get a few less pieces laying around.